Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a seriously fascinating, centuries-long journey. We are going to trace the evolutionary arc of tennis. We're talking about how a game that literally started as a quirky way for medieval French monks to get some exercise somehow morphed into the massive, high-tech, high-stakes global Grand Slams we know and love today. It's an absolutely wild story, you guys. We've got monks, we've got kings, some pretty intense physical pain, eccentric inventors, and yeah, a whole lot of bouncing rubber. So let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder where the vocabulary of this sport comes from? Like, really think about it. We toss these terms around all the time without a second thought. But the origins of the everyday tennis words you think you already know, well, they actually hold the secret map to the sport's incredible history. So, Chapter 1, Les Origines du Jeu, or the origins of the game. To really understand how this all started, we actually have to travel way back to 12th century northern France. Picture this: monks living in cloisters looking for a way to stay active invent a really simple game. They just started hitting a ball against the walls and those sloped roofs of their monasteries. They called it the jeu de paume, which literally translates to the game of the palm. And over time, this organic pastime evolved into the medieval indoor game of court palm, which you might know as real tennis. Just look at how radically different this walled, almost kind of lopsided environment is from the completely open, symmetrical courts we have today. The rules back then were entirely dictated by the architecture itself. For example, to even hit a legal serve, players actively had to bounce the ball off those sloped gallery roofs. The whole game was deeply, intrinsically tied to the urban and physical constraints of that exact era. Now, getting back to that weird vocabulary of ours, that medieval game of the palm, that is exactly where our modern words were born. Take the word tennis itself. It actually comes from the French warning cry, tenez, which essentially means receive or take this. The server would literally shout it right before hitting the ball. And racket? That derives from the Arabic word rakat, which means the palm of the hand. How cool is that? Then we have deuce, for when a game is tied at 40-40. That stems from the French phrase à deux du jeu, meaning you are 2 consecutive points away from winning the game. And my personal favorite, love, for a score of 0. Historians think it likely comes from the French louf, for the egg, because, an egg looks like a 0. Or there's another theory that it comes from a Dutch phrase, iets voor lucht doen, which meant you were playing purely for the praise and honor of the game, with 0 money at stake. Moving right along to Section 2, L'Âge d'Or Royal, the Royal Golden Age. So by the time we hit the 14th to 16th centuries, this game had absolutely exploded out of the monasteries. It became known as the Jeu des Rois, the Game of Kings. It was played obsessively by French royalty like Francois I and English kings like Henry VIII. Honestly, if you needed a king back then, you basically had to track him down at the tennis court. And to give you a sense of the sheer massive scale of this craze, just look at this number, 250. In the late 16th century, the city of Paris alone boasted 250 enclosed indoor courts. They called them tripotes. And these courts employed over 7,000 people just to craft the balls and rackets. This wasn't just some niche French hobby. It was a massive, continent-wide cultural phenomenon spreading like wildfire across Europe. As the game grew, it's fascinating to see how a real geographical and architectural split started to happen. On one hand, we had court palm, which was played in those 250 enclosed urban tripots we just talked about. But as you can imagine, space inside medieval walled cities was at an absolute premium. So for the people who wanted to play outside, they took the game to the parks, out to the moats and the open fields. This became known as long palm, the outdoor, open-air version of the sport. All right, Section 3, Rules, Scoring, and Equipment. Let's see how the gear evolved. So as the game naturally got faster and a lot more competitive, the physical toll on the players became immense, and that basically forced the equipment to evolve. Just imagine the painful reality of this progression. Originally, players were hitting a ball called an estouffe, which was made of leather and tightly stuffed with sand and lime, with their bare hands. Yeah, bare hands against tightly packed sand and leather. It hurt terribly. So to protect themselves, players started wearing these thick corded gloves. Eventually, that wasn't enough, so they moved to solid wooden paddles called battoirs. And then finally, around the year 1505, true salvation arrived. The very first rackets appeared, featuring long ashwood handles and woven sheepgut strings, a real game changer for the players' hands for sure. Now, what's really interesting is how they kept score. I found this absolutely fascinating while researching.
This specific era actually cemented the totally bizarre 15-30-40 system that we still use today. I mean, why not just 1, 2, 3, right? Well, historians believe it likely originated from reading the quarter hours on a clock face, 15, 30, 45. Or it might have come from the specific monetary stakes they used for gambling on the matches back then. Eventually, the 45 was just shortened to 40 because it was easier and faster to say. Plus that modern rule where you have to win by 2 points at deuce, that is a direct hangover from the ancient chassé system. That was the super complex medieval rule where players literally had to establish physical siege lines on the court to win disputed points. It's wild how that ancient geometry still dictates the modern game.
Moving into Section 4, the outdoor revival, or l'invention du lawn tennis. Fast forward to the 18th century, and the indoor aristocratic game was in a steep decline. It was practically killed off by the French Revolution and the famous tennis court oath of 1789. Most of those beautiful indoor courts were either completely abandoned or destroyed. But this vacuum perfectly set the stage for a Victorian-era outdoor revival across the English Channel. Enter a very eccentric guy named Major Walter Clopton Wingfield. In 1874, he patented a literal boxed kit for an outdoor grass court version of the game. He ambitiously named his invention spheristike, which is the Greek word for the arts of the ball. Luckily for sports broadcasters everywhere, the totally unpronounceable spheristike was very quickly renamed to lawn tennis. So the crucial point here is that while Major Wingfield successfully commercialized the game, he definitely hadn't perfected it yet. Take a look at the geometry of his original court design. It was this bizarre asymmetrical hourglass shape. The baselines were actually wider than the net. The net itself was significantly higher than it is today, and the rules he tossed into that box were just incredibly confusing and incomplete. Basically, it was a bit of a geometric mess. And that brings us to Section 5, Wimbledon and the Modern Era. This part of the story leads us to the most famous venue in tennis history. In 1877, the All England Croquet Club, located in a little London suburb called Wimbledon, was facing a major financial crisis. Get this, they specifically needed money to repair their pony roller. Yes, a pony roller for the grass. So to raise some quick funds, the club director, Henry Jones, decided to launch a tennis championship. They completely tossed out Wingfield's chaotic hourglass design and instituted a beautifully standardized rectangular court, exactly 78 feet long by 27 feet wide for singles. They lowered the net, they finally codified the rules, and in doing so, they officially birthed the modern game of tennis. Once that court was standardized, the tactical evolution of the game took off at breakneck speed. In that very first 1877 tournament, a guy named Spencer Gore shocked literally everyone by aggressively charging the net and volleying the ball out of the air to win the whole thing. It was unheard of. But then, the very next year in 1878, a complete unknown named Frank Haddo defeated Gore by just inventing a new shot, the lob. When Gore rushed the net, Haddo casually hit the ball high over his head. Boom. Counter tactic. It is so wild to think that these foundational tennis strategies were literally being invented in real time. And then just a few years later, in 1884, Wimbledon hosted its first women's tournament, which was won by Maud Watson, proving just how massive and expanding the sport's appeal truly was. But there was one final, absolutely critical innovation that tied all this outdoor play together: the ball itself. Think about it. You can't exactly play a bouncy game on grass with a medieval leather ball stuffed with sand. The modern game completely relied on the 19th century invention of vulcanized rubber by Charles Goodyear. That gave the ball a spectacular bounce. And right before that first 1877 Wimbledon, a player named John Mayer Heathcote had this brilliant light bulb moment to wrap that naked rubber ball in a white wool flannel cloth. This gave the racket string something to actually grip and vastly improved the aerodynamics of the ball. The perfect finishing touch. So, from monks bouncing lime-stuffed leather off cloister walls in the 12th century, to kings betting absolute fortunes in Parisian tripos, to those perfectly manicured, standardized lawns of Wimbledon, the evolution of tennis is just a massive testament to human ingenuity and our enduring love for play. We have literally gone from bare hands to sheep gut strings to today's ultra-light carbon fiber rackets equipped with digital sensors. It's an amazing journey. And it leaves us with one incredibly exciting question to ponder. Considering this crazy, centuries-long metamorphosis, how in the world will the sport of tennis evolve next? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, you guys. I'll catch you on the next one.